What are you saying, boys and girls? Hope you all had a good weekend. I know I did, still feeling a bit rough to be fair. But nothing a few turmeric teas won't sort out. So, before I actually get into today's video, I've had the opportunity to feature someone's awesome replications of psychedelic visuals in the video. It's called LOKA. I'll be linking his stuff down in the description. Please go and check it out. They're easily some of the best replication videos I've seen. And to feature them on the channel is brilliant because I'd like to start featuring more engaging visuals. I know sometimes people get a bit annoyed with the mundanity of the gameplay footage, but hopefully we can come to a nice balance by incorporating more funky visuals, you know what I mean, yeah. So what might be a quite controversial episode, because I do know there's a lot of logically minded, rationally minded, scientific people that watch my content, and I don't want to try and offend you and make you think that, oh, you're more closed-minded than me on all these psychonauts who are into mysticism and spirituality, because that's not what I'm doing at all. I just want to discuss in a calm, collected manner the limitations of science and why it struggles to explain consciousness, and why oftentimes academic types poo-poo psychedelics. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a perfect example of someone who dismisses psychedelics. I'm seriously not a fan of him and his sort of dogmatic stance. He's a great case study in the ego surrounding science and the sort of cult-like mentality that has emerged in science since we've entered the scientific age, and we're very much stuck into it. Lots of people dismiss psychedelics as just brain stuff, lofty new age ideals, it's all in your head, etc. And this really diminishes the profundity of the experience, because anyone who has had a mystical, transcendent experience of psychedelic, entered an altered state, unbelievably indescribable states of consciousness, will tell you that there's something going on that can't be described really in scientific materialistic terms. In fact, if you take enough of a psychedelic, or well, to be fair, some people can take a tiny bit of a psychedelic and the whole reality will literally melt. I've had this taking LSD, where literally the whole room melts around me and you basically are in a dream world, but completely conscious of it, not even like a lucid dream. It's like the most realistic dream you've ever had in your life. You're literally slap bang in it. And psychedelics can do this. I've literally been sharing these trip reports for years now. It should be pretty obvious that people can directly experience this. I've directly experienced it. Many of you have as well. To dismiss this is it's a great case study in the hubris of science and how egoic it can be. But obviously this is not me just like giving science shit, because science is absolutely incredible. I absolutely love it. I'm not saying it's evil or whatever, or it should be pushed to the side. Science is obviously a really important aspect of the human existence, of the technological advancements of Earth, making people's lives better, enhancing just reality itself, the evolution of technology, even though obviously it can spiral out of control. But I mean, reality is infinitely complex. There's so many different variations of how things can happen and how we react to them, and lots of great things have come from it. That just goes without saying, so please don't type in the comments like, you are obviously a science hater, mate, because seriously not. I absolutely love it, and I'm constantly reading science books and I've always been obsessed with it. And I used to be locked in that paradigm of just, oh, science can explain everything. But I feel like once you open your mind up a bit more, take psychedelics, meditate, have more life experience, read into just every aspect of life rather than just looking through it from the limited perspective of science. A lot like how people just look through, I say religious people just look through it's like the lens of, look at reality through the lens of Christianity. That is a limited worldview at the end of the day, and reality is infinite and infinitely complex. So it really does help to connect all the dots together to lead yourself down the path toward understanding it on a metaphysical, big picture level, which is obviously source / infinity / God. But yeah, the danger of science is that it can become a paradigm lock, and when you can't think outside of it, and it's used to dictate what is true or false in your worldview, aka things are in science are credible, things outside of science aren't credible, then science becomes a dogma, and then the people who subscribe to that dogma are not able to be open-minded enough to understand things that science doesn't approve of. Perfect example is psychedelics. I mean, scientists have often dismissed the mystical aspects of psychedelics, even though there's so many anecdotal direct experience reports out there that obviously I have shared, and you can literally just do it yourself. I think a lot of academics and scientists, what am I on about? Scientists fear psychedelics because it will shatter your worldview and force you to think outside the box, and human beings are naturally biased towards their own perspective. This is just a function of the ego. There's nothing wrong with this. This is just how life works, how survival works. It's helpful when we're talking about stuff like limited perspectives, not to think about it in a negative way. We've just got to critique it from above, in a sense. So yeah, I love science, but I love it so much that I want it to get better. I want it to merge with mysticism, with psychedelic states, with other possibilities. So yeah, say like decades ago, science discredited psychedelics, but now, I mean, it's pretty obvious that they're the breakthrough therapy for people who are depressed. It makes them reconsider their whole lives, the traumas, makes them face up to things as suppressing, which is again why I think scientists are fearful of it, because in a sense I feel like a lot of scientists who are locked into that worldview are scared of thinking outside the box and thinking of other perspectives, because I mean, literally, science versus religion, that's been going on for ages, hasn't it? They can't seem to connect together. But funnily enough, a lot of the most famous scientists, like Einstein, were deeply spiritual people who had a lot of mystical, philosophical ideas about reality. I really implore you to study the work and life of Albert Einstein, possibly the most famous scientist of all time. I mean, his theory of relativity is just extremely spiritual when you start to think about it. I mean, I've taken psychedelics and really contemplated relativity, and it's an extremely mystical, metaphysical quality to reality. And that completely shook up science, and science shakes itself up every generation, really. We're constantly rewriting the books. Even though it is a very rigorous method of examining reality on a material level, it is almost fluid as well. It's constantly evolving and changing, but there's always that resistance, isn't there? Oftentimes, you can see this everywhere, like the resistance between change and tradition, like staying the same, conservatism versus liberal. And say in science, there's a little bit like more conservative scientists, more liberally minded scientists. Some people that want to progress the field, and people who want to stick by the books, which is there's benefits to both of them. Doesn't mean one aspect is better than another aspect. They can both be useful, but when it comes to science, we should be progressing, in my opinion. We should be constantly evolving and taking in more perspectives, and that's why psychedelics, I mean, the literal, what could be more scientific than directly studying reality via consciousness, which is already what you're doing when you're doing science. I mean, whether it's looking down a microscope into a petri dish, or collecting data and peer reviewing it, what could be more scientific than getting loads of people on psychedelics and examining all the reports and seeing if there's a consensus that you can come to regarding the experience. And there's actually places like the Imperial College in London are researching DMT entities. People are actually taking DMT and they're cross-referencing all their experiences to try and come to a deeper understanding of what's going on, what sort of entities are likely to appear. And there are a lot of crossovers, overlaps in the experiences that allow you to come to a scientific understanding, which is great. So science is actually merging with the psychedelic realm, in a sense. But the beef of this video, what I really wanted to talk about, even though we're like 9 minutes in, but it's always good to lay them foundations. Can science explain consciousness? Do I think science can explain consciousness? And I personally think no. I think that consciousness is the foundational aspect of reality, and since science is a product of the material world, that it literally exists to examine the material world, it can't actually explain what consciousness is, because consciousness quite literally is making science. It's imagining science. to explain itself in a relative manner. This is probably going to trigger a lot of scientifically minded people, because what I've said is a very loose, lofty explanation for why science can't do it, but it really is quite hard to convey this if you haven't had some form of transcendent psychedelic experience where basically materialism completely melts away from you and you become literal just consciousness without any material attachments at all, and you become infinity, you become God. Which is, it's really hard to actually convey this stuff without triggering people, because we are so ingrained into a scientific understanding of the world. I mean, look at just school. I mean, when I went to school, the RE teachers and the science teachers, they basically hated each other. They were completely conflicting. But you know what I always noticed, even though I was always more on the science side, I genuinely noticed, this is just from my personal experience, and this is generalisation, I always noticed that there was a bigger ego on the scientific people. Like, oh, I'm completely beyond this, I'm completely beyond spirituality and lofty ideas of an infinite world. And then the RE teachers were often a lot more humble about this sort of stuff, which I respected. Even though, again, they didn't really grasp just how deep the rabbit hole goes as well, now looking back on it. But they always did have a lot more nobility surrounding their beliefs. And then the science, I remember I was in RE and the science teachers came in like, no, it's all fake, science will explain it, just give it time. And it's like, I don't know, they've always struggled to explain. I don't know, it's like, is it called the hard problem of consciousness? It's always been a challenge, and I just don't think personally that it's going to be able to explain it by itself. Reality is just so infinitely complex, as you understand from just literally just existing. If you have an open mind, you'll see how beautifully complex reality is, the way it's been woven together by infinity, by consciousness. And how could it just be explained by something that functions in the material sense? If you have an experience of infinity, there is no science. It's all imaginary in your head, which is not a bad thing. This is how science exists in the material realm for a reason. Another problem with science is it discredits intuition, analogies, and throws many things into an alternative medicine box or a pseudo-scientific box for a while, until there's, again, something proves it within the scientific paradigm, and then they completely acknowledge it, because that's just the epitome of closed-minded thinking, isn't it? It's like, until my worldview acknowledges it, it can't be true, which is just a very closed-minded, unconscious way of approaching reality. But yeah, science is imperfect. It's still building upon itself. I think in my lifetime it's gonna merge with mysticism and psychedelics, and that's what's so beautiful about the psychedelic sort of revolution we're going through again with the internet, and the new generation of people becoming a lot more open-minded about this sort of stuff, is that the scientists of the future will take the foundations of the science we have now and merge it with deeper understanding of consciousness, because at the end of the day, psychedelics are probably the very best tool to understand reality and consciousness, as many people have done throughout history and are doing so today. And what I like to highlight with this channel, it's really not just all in your head. And if you think that, then yeah, fair enough. I would just say to keep diving into the psychedelics and keep diving into consciousness, hours of contemplation, and you might end up coming to the same realization I have had, that reality is infinite and it is all just universal mind, universal love, consciousness, God, source, and science is just second-hand knowledge. Tons of credible things exist within and also outside of science, and it's made a ton of mistakes. And you'll need to look outside of science in many cases if you want the cutting edge, because it is slow to catch up in many topics, and this is just true of anything. The cutting edge is always going to be denied by the people who are currently at the top of the game in a field, because realistically it's going to discredit a lot of their work. A lot of this stuff is happening with Graham Hancock. He's talking about, there's this ancient civilization that might have been wiped out by some disaster, natural disaster, and the archaeologists of the past, or current archaeologists who dismiss his perspective, of course they're going to, because it is going to discredit their work, and it's a survival-based reaction from the ego. But realistically, if you were an actual humble scientist and cared, or archaeologist and cared about the progress and development of your field, you would be open to the cutting edge and new perspectives, because at the end of the day, it is going to change. Everything's constantly changing and evolving, and to resist that is to resist reality. A lot of all this is just my personal speculation on the matter, my direct experiences that I've had in life that have made me believe this. Completely fair enough if you think differently. I mean, we're all just on our own path, aren't they? Everyone has different circumstantial events in their life that lead them to believe the things they believe. It just is what it is. I'm not bothered at all. In fact, I massively respect people who come at psychedelics from a rational angle, because each perspective is valid in the grand scheme of things, and I would completely encourage that. This is just one of my perspectives that I know a lot of other people on the channel share. And if you don't share that, then please write a comment. I absolutely love reading comments from differing perspectives. It's fascinating to see how different minds vary in their understanding of reality. And it is all valid at the end of the day, regardless of what I think of what is the truth or not. The final thing I'll say on the matter, as to why I think science is unable to explain consciousness and what is reality, why we're here, what's the point of it, etc., is because science is a limited perspective by its function. It has to be, because literally it's useful for some specific uses, but fundamentally it is limited, just like every other perspective is limited within the finite realm. It's like the perspective of like archaeology can't explain everything, can it? It can't explain biology. Each little differentiation in a perspective has its own use for the specific field that it studies. So that's why I think science can't explain consciousness, because it can't explain everything, can it? It's useful for its specific needs. And yeah, and no perspective, it's not absolute, it's finite. And the truth is that reality is infinite if you realise that by yourself. It's so hard to talk about this without knowing that I'm going to trigger people, but we're already too deep into it now, aren't we? So the truth is, for me, the truth that I've come to understand is that not only is science imaginary, that religion is too. In fact, all of life is imaginary. This whole dream is imaginary, and that's once you realise that, without the ego tampering with it, because that can often happen on psychedelics. People go crazy thinking like, oh my god, everything's imaginary. It's like, no, it's actually the most beautiful revelation of all time, because reality feels so real. Your suffering, your joy and experience, life feels so real for you, but the truth is that it's all a dream. Whose dream, you may ask? Well, I guess you've got to figure that out for yourself. So yeah, in conclusion, science is brilliant, I love it, but we've just got to take the humble position and see that this is the best approximation at this point during humanity's evolution of how to understand reality, and in 1,000 years in the future, it's going to be completely different. I don't think anyone can deny that. And whether you disagree with what I think the truth is, I mean, I briefly touched on it before, we're going to go way deeper into that. I just wanted to pepper it in there, because we are going to get stuck into this year. This is going to be my main goal, is trying to convey what is the absolute truth of these psychedelic experiences and mystical states and reality. But yeah, so science is brilliant, but in terms of working out how the world of the universe actually functions, it's limited just to the mechanics and doesn't address the experiential, subjective nature of reality and consciousness. So it attempts the how, but it doesn't actually fully address the why or even the actual thing itself. So yeah, for example, science may say, oh, I've got X amount of atoms in the universe and there's all these hydrogen and oxygen molecules, but that doesn't even touch the actual experience, the actual substrate, the ground of inhabiting the body, and what actually the isness of the experience. And that's why psychedelics are so powerful, because they completely throw you into isness. Even, I'd say, rational people could agree with me there and say that you literally can experience just isness. You don't need any externality to just be. It just is itself. Reality just is itself, or can be on altered states. But right now in the human ego that we inhabit, it's not exactly like that, but that's exactly the function of how survival works. You wouldn't be able to survive as a human ego if reality was all fluid and dreamlike and you were aware it was all imaginary. The beauty of it is that it feels so real. And science, like all things, is just witnessed through the lens of our consciousness. but then science has little idea of how consciousness can even work, so that very lens that which it perceives through is used to understand the world is itself not understood. So yeah, in that way it's limited, which isn't a bad thing. Everything's limited, because if it wasn't limited, it wouldn't be finite, wouldn't be able to have this human experience. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know what your perspective on this is. Definitely going to be covering more of the really lofty metaphysical stuff that I started going on about in this video, and hope you look forward to that.